Following last night's AEW Revolution pay-per-view, we're going to be looking at whether the ending to the exploding barbed wire deathmatch was in fact a botch or an intentional dud explosion, as well as Jon Moxley's reaction to the finish. And we find out how Christian Cage ended up signing with AEW. But first, Cody Rhodes recently appeared on the Action Sports Jax podcast and had some harsh words for WWE's gold brand. When asked about NXT's reported move to Tuesday nights, Cody responded, "We have destroyed them for over a year now in that space. Them leaving, perhaps that opens up a different viewership for us on Wednesdays. We're not reactionary to their booking and won't change anything we do with what they decide to do on Wednesdays. There are a lot of smart people who work for WWE and perhaps they're planning something else. Maybe it's Wednesday Night Raw for all I know. I'm not assuming their white flag moving to Tuesday nights is a true white flag. I'll wait and see. In the interim, we'll continue to come up with new content, great stories, and make new kings and queens on our roster. If you're ever backstage at AEW, no one is talking about our competition." As Rhodes stated, he's remaining cautious that something else could replace NXT on Tuesday nights, which is very possible given WWE's track record on counter-booking against their competition. Next up, we have lots of news following the alleged botch that closed AEW Revolution, which saw a seemingly failed pyro go off after a dramatic finish. At the end of the exploding barbed wire deathmatch main event, Jon Moxley was left handcuffed in the middle of the ring with his former friend Eddie Kingston rushing to his aid. With a countdown to a big explosion coming to an end, Kingston was unable to get Moxley out of the ring, diving on top of him to protect him from the explosion. A small pyro then went off around the ring, which led to Eddie selling it like he'd been shot. The internet has blown up more than the ring itself, with many fans finding humour in the finish. AEW have responded to this by issuing multiple copyright strikes on Twitter for any GIFs or videos of the ending, which suggests they aren't exactly happy with the way the show went down. At the same time, other clips from the show remain online. This isn't the first time AEW have received criticism for issuing copyright strikes, but let's not get into that here. WWE Hall of Famer Bully Ray responded to the botch by tweeting a Vince McMahon quote which read, "The only thing they remember is the finish." AEW wrestler Miro tweeted, "LMAO, Kenny Omega is such a bad engineer." After the show went off air, Jon Moxley took to the mic like a true pro, thinking on his feet to make an excuse for the pyro fail. Whilst he gave Omega credit for being tough, he said that he makes a terrible exploding ring. Moxley then thanked the crowd for coming out and told them that he'd be back for Kenny Omega and his AEW World Championship. This explosion was likely intended to write Jon Moxley off of TV due to his wife's pregnancy, but that is not yet confirmed. It makes me wonder if Moxley will make one more appearance to give him a proper send-off. It really is a shame that the pyro failed, as this would have been such a great way to explain his absence. If it had gone to plan, it would have been one of the most dramatic finishes to a pay-per-view in some time, with Eddie Kingston sacrificing himself for his former friend. Tony Khan doubled down on the claims that the lack of explosion was a fail on Omega's part, who had been seen engineering the explosive structure on Dynamite leading up to Revolution. Tony told the media, "I think we're all lucky that the bomb going off at the end didn't really hurt anybody. That Kenny's big master plan, that he built a dud. Which, who would have thought when he drew up the big plan with crayons that maybe the bomb might fail to take both guys out." Tony added, "All through the match we saw it looked very cool and it's a deadly painful match, but at the end, I don't know what people really wanted. Unless you wanted us to actually explode the guys at the end, there's only so much you can do. So without actually blowing the ring and both guys up, I think the basic explanation is that Kenny's ring, set to explode, as a heel who built this thing with a hammer and nails as we saw, that the final bomb just didn't go off." And with that said, this explanation would make sense had Eddie Kingston not been told to sell it the way he did. He was conscious before the explosion as he tried to wake Moxley up. Immediately after the explosion, he was motionless, selling the effects as if it was supposed to hurt him. If it was planned to be a dud, he would have been instructed to sell it with confusion rather than going unconscious. This obviously isn't Kingston's fault, but the explanation seems to suggest AEW are thinking on their feet rather than this being the plan fan the whole time. I'm as big of a fan of AEW as anyone, but I'm not convinced that this was meant to happen. Tony Khan ended the call by saying, "I would be remiss if I didn't leave the scrum without promising everyone this. In this year, 2021, I promise you I'm gonna have some aces up my sleeve. You were gonna see some cool stuff. You were going to see some stuff you didn't expect to see. This is the beginning. I promise it's going to be a great year for AEW." And personally, I do look forward to seeing what these aces are, but I'm promising myself to never get my hopes up for a CM Punk debut ever again. Hopefully we get some more New Japan crossover with the likes of Kazuchika Okada and the ace himself, Hiroshi Tanahashi, showing up on Dynamite. I guess we'll just have to wait to see what happens. And finally, on last night's AEW Revolution pay-per-view, we saw the debut of Christian Cage. He signed a contract in the middle of the ring before leaving without saying a word. It's been a mere 5 weeks since his big return to WWE in the Royal Rumble, making it to the final 4 of the match. During the same media call we spoke about earlier, Tony Khan revealed the details of how Christian Cage became All Elite. He said, "I met Christian Cage 7 years ago and he's a great person and I've always really liked him as a person, but long before that I've been a huge fan of him as a wrestler. I think he's one of the great wrestlers of the last couple of decades. He's had great matches in different companies, he's been a great singles wrestler, a great tag team champion, and I think he's one of the best minds in wrestling. He's in a great physical condition and we saw him very recently compete on pay-per-view. There was a lot of interest in it, it generated a lot of interest, and he was interested in wrestling on a regular basis, and you know, he gave me a call and said, I'd really like to come to wrestle in AEW for you. And I said, I'd really like to have you come and wrestle for me. It all came together great and I think it's going to be really good. There have been reports over the last couple of days that talks between Christian and WWE fell through following his appearance at the Royal Rumble, and Tony's comments seem to suggest that maybe WWE weren't willing to give him the regular in-ring time that he desired. It's certainly going to be interesting to see how Christian Cage gets on now that he's in AEW. It's also been said that Christian made his mind up about joining AEW before his Royal Rumble appearance. It seems he wanted to get that reunion with Edge in the match before going his separate ways. We are yet to hear from Christian himself after his appearance at AEW Revolution, as he did not speak on the show or at the media scrum. Although there is nothing publicly announced as of yet, he will likely be on Dynamite this Wednesday. And let me know who you'd like to see Christian feud with first in the comments down below. And there's so much news coming out of the pay-per-view that we're going to have one more news video tonight, so make sure you keep an eye on the channel.